Here's a question nobody in Washington wants to answer directly. When you fire more Patriot interceptors in 5 days than the entire Ukraine war burned through in 3 years, what comes next? Not rhetorically. What actually comes next? On the production line, on the map, in the alliances that are watching. That's what this video is about. Not whether Operation Epic Fury was justified, not the politics of it, the math. Because the math doesn't care about justification, and right now, the math is telling a story that the Pentagon briefing room is not. Let me walk you through it. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury, the largest American military deployment in the Middle East since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. 40,000 troops, multiple carrier strike groups, B-2 stealth bombers flying 30-hour round trips from Missouri, simultaneous strikes on over 2,500 Iranian military and government facilities in a single day. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was killed in the opening hours. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth called it twice the air power of shock and awe in Iraq. On pure lethality metrics, the operation was precise, fast, and brutal. Nobody is disputing that part. What happened to the magazine behind that lethality? That's the part that gets quieter. In the first 5 days alone, the United States fired more than 800 Patriot interceptors, $3 million each. That's $2.4 billion in Patriot missiles in less than a week. The total THAAD interceptors expended during the conflict came in at roughly 150 missiles, more than 25% of the global stockpile, burned through in under 2 weeks during the preceding 12-day war in June 2025 and the weeks that followed. More than 1,000 Tomahawk cruise missiles were fired at Iran, consuming close to a third of the estimated pre-war inventory of 3,100. Iran produced over 100 ballistic missiles per month. The United States builds 6 or 7 THAAD interceptors in the same period. Standard doctrine requires 2 interceptors per incoming target. Do that math, and you realize that monthly THAAD production can theoretically counter just 3 to 4 incoming ballistic missiles. Iran was firing hundreds. Marco Rubio said that out loud in congressional testimony. The Pentagon did not push back on the numbers. The Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, published the most detailed public accounting of what this war cost the arsenal. Their conclusion: restoring pre-war stockpiles of Tomahawk cruise missiles, Patriot interceptors, and THAAD will take a minimum of 3 years. In some cases, the recovery timeline runs to 2030 or 2031, 1 to 4 years just to reach pre-war levels, and then more years after that to build toward the inventory levels the Pentagon actually wants for a potential conflict with China. Defense Secretary Hegseth acknowledged it. He said replenishment will take months and years. He then praised contractors for agreeing to quadruple production of high-end weapons. Trump announced CEOs had agreed to quadruple production. The problem is not ambition. The problem is that expanding a missile production line takes years from contract award to meaningful output. And that's assuming supply chains cooperate, subcontractors are qualified, and the workforce exists. During the Korean War, with a far broader industrial base than today, it took 18 months before wartime mobilization translated into adequate supplies reaching the front. That was 1950. The defense industrial base is significantly more consolidated now. The American Enterprise Institute put it plainly. This is not a logistics problem. It is a strategic vulnerability. While the munitions were burning, something else was moving. In the first week after the U.S. bombed Iran, gas prices in the United States jumped 48 cents per gallon. The Strait of Hormuz, which carries roughly 20% of globally traded oil, was closed by Iran. Brent crude spiked above $110 a barrel at multiple points. The International Energy Agency characterized it as the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. Moody's Analytics calculated that the war cost U.S. households roughly $750 each, about $100 billion total, between increased military spending and higher energy prices. Goldman Sachs estimated that higher gasoline prices alone represented around $140 billion in annualized headwind to American household incomes as of mid-April. Gas was at $4.06 a gallon on average. The pre-war level was $2.98. Trump's response to this at the pump: a very small price to pay for USA and world safety and peace. By late June 2026, the Pentagon had submitted an $87.6 billion supplemental spending request, on top of a military budget already at historic levels. The total military cost of the war was estimated at $34 to $42 billion as of mid-June. The total bill to the United States, counting economic damage to households, energy disruption, and military expenditure, was well above $100 billion. The United States was already carrying a national debt at roughly 100% of GDP, near the record set after World War II. And a fragile ceasefire, more precisely a memorandum of understanding signed in Lucerne on June 17th, was already straining within days of its signing. Now, here's where this story gets complicated in a way the numbers alone don't capture. While Operation Epic Fury was underway, something was happening on the other side of the planet that received very little attention. In early March 2026, South Korean media reported C-5 Galaxy and C-17 Globemaster transport aircraft, the kind used specifically to move Patriot and THAAD systems, landing at Osan Air Base. Parts of the THAAD system deployed in South Korea since 2017 were being removed and shipped to the Middle East. Patriot interceptors were pulled from the Indo-Pacific to plug holes in the defensive umbrella over the Persian Gulf. 2,500 Marines were redirected from Japan to the Arabian Sea. H-64 Apache helicopter units had already been withdrawn from South Korea in January. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung said it publicly in a cabinet meeting that was live-streamed. While we have expressed opposition, the reality is that we cannot fully push through our position. Read that sentence again. The president of a country, America, has 28,500 troops stationed in, a country technically still at war with its northern neighbor, a country that had to endure economic punishment from China when it originally accepted THAAD in 2017. That president just told his cabinet that he cannot stop the United States from removing the systems that protect his people. And North Korea was not standing still. Pyongyang conducted more than 20 missile launches in 2026 alone, including hypersonic glide vehicles and submarine-launched ballistic missiles specifically designed to complicate interception. The security vacuum was not hypothetical. It was structural, visible, and real. Japan's relations with Beijing were under significant strain at the same moment. The Philippines, where 1 in 4 seafarers is Filipino, with many now navigating the volatile Strait of Hormuz, faced domestic political pressure over the value of American alliance commitments. The Chatham House assessment was direct. The war is fueling worries about U.S. commitment to its Pacific partners. This matters because of who is watching. A CSIS ambassador summed it up in a June 15th roundtable. The Chinese watched effortlessly as we expended our most sophisticated interceptors and watched up close the limits of American air power to reach strategic effects. We've just weakened our hand and shown our cards in a way that I think will do real damage to our ability to affect the course of events in Asia. That's not a fringe position. That's a senior diplomat at America's most respected defense think tank, saying out loud what the strategic community is thinking privately. Here's the specific concern. China fields the DF-21D and DF-26 ballistic missiles specifically designed to target American aircraft carriers and forward bases across the Western Pacific. China produces missiles at industrial scale. Its military has been expanding, new aircraft carriers, 6th-generation fighters, rapid nuclear arsenal growth. Xi Jinping instructed his generals to be ready for a Taiwan operation by 2027. That's not a prediction. That's a stated Chinese military planning horizon, and analysts at Defense Security Asia assess the following. With roughly half of America's Patriot and THAAD interceptors consumed, and the weapons that protect Guam, Japanese and South Korean bases now depleted, American commanders could face a severe allocation dilemma in any simultaneous crisis. Guam, the principal U.S. logistics and bomber hub for any Taiwan contingency, would be among the most exposed. The Heritage Foundation had warned in January 2026 that high-end interceptors like THAAD and SM-3 would likely be exhausted within days of sustained combat with China, even before Iran burned through what was left. The CSIS report published in May stated it without ambiguity. The depleted inventories have created a window of vulnerability for a potential Western Pacific conflict. Meanwhile, the Navy paused $14 billion in approved weapons sales to Taiwan because it needed the munitions for the Iran war. Let that land. The United States paused arms deliveries to the democratic island it is committed to defend from the country that has been openly preparing to seize it, because it had run short of weapons fighting a third country. Now step back and look at this from the angle of grand strategy, because that's the frame that actually explains the bind America is in. Every American administration since at least 2011 has declared the same intention. Pivot to Asia, make China the priority, stop getting pulled back into the Middle East. Obama said it in 2011. Trump said it in his first term. Biden's national defense strategy made it doctrine. Trump's second administration put China as the pacing threat into the national security strategy and sent prioritizers, people who explicitly wanted to focus on Asia, to the senior levels of the Pentagon. And then Trump launched the biggest Middle Eastern military operation since the Iraq invasion. This isn't a failure of intention. It's a failure of architecture. The United States has built a foreign policy posture so deeply embedded in the Middle East, through alliances, through intelligence relationships, through the Israel lobby, through Gulf state bases, through energy dependencies, and decades of strategic habit, that every administration runs into the same wall. The desire to leave collides with the infrastructure of staying, and the infrastructure wins. The Iran war did not happen, despite Trump wanting to focus on Asia. It happened because the logic of the Middle East system, the accumulated pressures, the Netanyahu meetings in February 2026, the nuclear intelligence, the political cost of appearing weak, the 47 years of antagonism built into the relationship, all of it produced a decision that contradicted the stated strategy. And because it contradicted the stated strategy, it left exactly the gap that the stated strategy was designed to prevent. China observed every minute of it. Not just the lethality of American strikes, which were impressive, the consumption rate, the production constraints, the political pressure, the domestic inflation, the alliance friction in Seoul and Tokyo, the $87.6 billion supplemental request going to a Congress already fighting over Social Security and Medicare, the gap between what America says it will defend and what it can physically sustain, defending simultaneously. There's a version of this story where the Iran war ends up accelerating the very shift it was supposed to coexist with, where the exhaustion and the cost and the alliance damage create irresistible pressure to actually leave the Middle East and truly pivot to Asia. That's the argument John Mearsheimer has been making. It's what some Pentagon planners are quietly hoping for. After Vietnam, the United States refocused with extraordinary discipline on NATO. After this, the logic goes, the refocus will be on the Pacific. Maybe. But the structures that kept America in the Middle East, despite 30 years of stated intentions to leave, are still intact. The Israel relationship still holds enormous political weight. The Gulf state bases are still there. The energy flows, even in an era of U.S. energy independence, still matter to American allies who depend on them. And the domestic politics of appearing to abandon a costly war right after fighting it are not straightforward. What is certain is this: the weapons are gone. The inventories won't be back to pre-war levels before 2029 at the earliest. The debt is mounting. The allies in Asia saw their defense removed and were told they couldn't stop it. And Beijing, which helped Iran obtain satellite surveillance and missile guidance systems according to multiple intelligence assessments, watched American production rates, consumption rates, congressional politics, and the elasticity of the U.S. defense industrial base in real time under combat conditions for 109 days. The war confirmed American lethality. Nobody doubts the United States can strike hard when it commits. What it revealed, quietly, in logistics data and congressional hearings and South Korean cabinet meetings, is that the magazine behind that lethality has limits the system was not designed to sustain. And the question that remains unresolved is not whether America can fight. It's whether it can fight here and there at the same time against enemies that have been counting bullets. That's FEN for Borderlines, analysis from the edge. The sources for everything in this video are linked below. If this kind of detail matters to you, subscribe. The channel is just getting started.